Uncle Gordon. How you doing?
Oh boy, Uncle Gordon. All right, or Coach, right?
Coach,
Hey, wait, which one of us is older? I think I am.
how old are you?
54.
You're older.
Damn. Yeah. I mean, I feel it. So, right? I feel it.
Yeah, it happens. But I think at our age, you're just old. So,
Yeah.
what does
I'm
it
actually,
matter?
I'm proud of myself. I actually hurt my hand on a dyno the other day, but it was worth
Oh,
it.
climbing?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. That's good. At least you didn't injured it doing something fun. Didn't like hit yourself with a hammer or something stupid. So
Yeah. Exactly. Right. And then I mean, dyno. It's funny. It's funny how dynos like you look at them and like, that looks scary at all, and then you get on it like, oh, geez, really? You want me to do what?
for the audience, dyno is basically it's short for dynamic climbing. So you might have started a couple holds, maybe one, but then you're going a long way, typically in a jumping fashion to another hold. So it's kind of all fours off. Off your fours being your two hands, your 2 feet off the wall, jumping. So,
Yeah.
did you hit your hand on the wall? Or did you grab it and then get injured?
Yeah. It's a good lesson though, and there's an app parallel to what we do in our industry, right? I mean, we're constantly trying new technologies and hearing about new technologies all the time, and so often, you just need to go out and try them. It might be a little intimidating. You're gonna feel stupid again, and you don't want to like struggle through it. But like, how else are you really gonna get a feel for it? Right?
Well, you won't. Otherwise, you're just yapping. So
Yeah, and then and it's helpful to be aware of the learning process because frequently what you're doing is, I mean, things are sold as a new paradigm, as a total game changer, and most of the times they're not. If you're lucky, they are incrementally better than what you have now, right? So you got to try them out to see how do they fit into your existing knowledge graph, your brain, your way of working. I mean,
yeah.
if I get a new car, I don't want a new paradigm. I don't want a dashboard I don't understand and some weird shaped steering wheel and all that stuff. I just get myself ready. I want something that's like familiar and recognizable and hopefully incrementally better, at least not worse than what I already have. But the reason Joe and I are talking is because sometimes when I'm standing in line at a supermarket and for some reason I start thinking about data stuff. So I was like, I just sent him a text. And I was thinking about like, I'm looking for what's my reference tech stack going for doing analytics and data right now. 2012 I had one, 2017 I had one, 2024 I'm trying to figure out what that is, right? And
Interesting.
Yeah, it's really
what are your needs these days versus your needs in the past?
In some ways they're the same and they're different, right? It really is always a function of who am I trying to enable. So these days I'm VP of data over at New Fire Global. We do a lot of product engineering, data engineering for healthcare companies, primarily not only healthcare, but healthcare we have a big footprint there, and it's a really appealing mission to me because we're like, hey, driving something that has some impact, kidney care, LGBT care, community health, all this stuff. It's really cool. And so I got to think about like, okay, well, our clients come in all different shapes and sizes, and like, if I try to enable them, I need to understand them, and I need to give them a solution that fits them, right? Like, so if you talk to, let's say, a Fortune 100 company, and you ask them what BI tool they have, you know what they're going to say?
Excel.
All of them. Yes, they'll have
that too. Yeah.
Yes, they will have Excel for sure, and they will have all of them, right?
They will have all of them.
All of them, right? So if I come in and say, hey, let's really simplify your solution, and we're just going to standardize you on Tableau, that'll never happen. That'll just not happen, right? You're disrupting 90% of the company. So for that kind of situation, you got to think about like, okay, well, where can I standardize? Where do I move? Where do I put the norm, right? And then what degree of heterogeneity do we encourage? That balance between centralized and flexible. Simple on the other end of the spectrum, the small companies, overbuilding for flexibility is just going to slow them down, right? I mean, most small companies shouldn't even build their own data stack. They should just, basically buy analytics from somebody else, right? I mean, if you have 50 employees and you don't have let's say you don't have anyone technical, maybe you're doing retail, right, of some kind. Do you really want to learn Snowflake and DBT and everything else, right?
Right.
focus on your product market fit. So different situations, different solutions. So the one I was sort of thinking about was like, I was debating, and something you have to relearn these lessons. I was debating myself, for it was like, hey, should I be using Cube in my reference tech stack, or I should be using Omni, right?
Mm.
And
Well, explain the difference between these for the audience. I don't think everyone's quite hip to the.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Why don't you explain it, and I'll jump in too.
Okay. So Omni is a BI tool. The lineage traces back actually to Looker, and a lot of the a couple of the product guys, product people from Looker, I should say, more than one. But they started another company called Omni that I think takes kind of a similar-ish philosophy to Looker, in that there's a sort of so Looker was popular because it's popular for a couple of reasons, but it really caught popularity with the analytics crowd because you could do semantic modeling in Looker using LookML, right? So in this case, the semantic layer and the logic's really tightly coupled to the BI layer, right? And so Omni, last time I checked, takes a similar approach unless they've changed. So that's semantic layer tightly coupled to BI. On the other hand, Cube takes a different approach where it's sort of a headless semantic layer, so to speak, where it's decoupled from any underlying implementation details or overlying implementation details, I should say, too. And so I think that, to me, that's a difference. Did I get that correct, Gordon?
Very well done. Well done.
Thank you.
Maybe you should be Coach Joe, and
assistant coach.
And of course, we're having this technical conversation.
Waterboy, yeah.
And then we're discussing products that are made by real people, and we know these people, and so on. Right? So this discussion, of course, completely independent of the character and quality of the people involved. Right? Trust me, they're all excellent people.
Yeah, great people.
And these are great products too. So which product do you choose? Well, it's that same old lesson again. You got to constantly remind yourself, well, what are you trying to accomplish? What gap? What is it? What's your situation? And I realized that really you can't really choose between the two of them without knowing where you're focusing, right? So, and I think the angle here is, remember we talked about in the past that producing analytics is sort of a manufacturing process, right? You have measurement, which is data. You move data, you combine data, you prep it, you turn it into knowledge like aggregations and so on, and then you turn it into advice so that people take actions. They drive outcomes, right? It's a manufacturing process that delivers the most value when it's continuous and low friction. So the purpose of bringing in any additional tool or process or people is to accelerate that flow, right? Either fix a blockage, maybe improve quality, or just plain old acceleration. So the question here, Cube or Omni, what part of that flow are you trying to accelerate?
Yep.
Right. And so as Joe was saying, now I'm speaking to the audience, right? There goes the fourth wall or whatever it's called, right? Omni's it has its own ability you can create a semantic layer within Omni. So it's being very tightly coupled as the BI tool. And they have a first-class integration with DBT where they push down, the model, the semantic layer they're creating in Omni down into DBT. It's all very nice. It's very natural in many ways because, this whole idea that you just create a model out of the air is just fiction. Very, very few people do this. In fact, you tend to create it in practice, right? I'm trying to create a revenue report, and I'm trying to, I need LTV. And I'm doing this. And it's like, I don't have LTV. Hey, I may model it on the spot because I'm thinking to myself, hey, let me define it now so other people can use it and we don't create a mess. So that's the way modeling really works usually, right? Or frequently works. It's nice to step back and do it in bigger chunks, but there's a lot of discovery on the.
But in practice, right? Yeah, it is true. Right? I was talking about this today at a different podcast, but there was just this notion that often the work is ad hoc on the fly, sort of a million different queries, answering a million different questions, but nothing concretely consolidated. Right. To say, typical, in a bigger data model paradigm. Yep. Anyway.
Yeah. So, Omni has a tight coupling and it allows you to go fast. Right. But, we go back to our Fortune 100 example. If I built my semantic layer inside my BI tool, it's just more difficult for other tools to utilize it, right?
Well, you wouldn't. I think that's one of the reasons that GCP bought Looker actually was really for the LookML pieces, for what I heard behind the scenes. Yeah. What about DBT's semantic model? Now that we're on the topic of
Well, I think
friends.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's sort of like this difference between the level of sophistication and complexity, right? And
Yeah.
these are all my opinions, right? But to me, the DBT semantic layer, DBT metrics, I would certainly use it. It feels fairly basic, right? Which also makes it a good general purpose tool. Seems like a good place to start. I would, it's and it sort of depends on like what level of sophistication you're at. I kind of like it as a norm that other tools should support, right? So it sort of has this like this support for metrics that sort of within the analytics operating system, right? And then it allows DBT to stay agnostic and support all their various partners.
Yeah, it's interesting. So you're thinking about like tight coupling versus
loose
coupling,
right? Because you use the term, right? In Omni, you don't have headless BI, right? Now in Cube, again, I'm still getting to learn this stuff, right? I'm doing my dyno, right, trying to learn them. It's like, okay, we can define business metrics as first-class objects. We get version control, all this stuff, but you also get authentication and caching, and you get a cool AI API, and it's pretty slick, right? But there's no BI tool there, so you're developing if you want to do that iterative flow of like modeling and developing reporting at the same time, you sort of have two tools and two screens, right? And that's okay. And the payoff is you have a semantic layer now that can support multiple BI tools. And also, like I said, they have that AI API, so you could be supporting your chatbot at the same time, right? And so I would argue here, you're trying to do an acceleration that's a little bit earlier in the manufacturing process than you would if you're doing the acceleration, if you're doing your semantic layer inside your BI tool, right?
Yeah.
A little further upstream, values probably deferred a little bit, but more broad, and support a more heterogeneous use case, right?
Well, I mean, I've been vocal about this in the past, but I actually feel like the semantic layer, as we describe it today, and the analytics layer, I mean, it's totally fine being there, but I don't feel like it actually solves the right problem in the right place.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I always felt like the semantic layer, you could look at it from two perspectives. This is my perspective, but I think that actually, if you were to, so when we get into software applications,
yeah,
right, you have calculations there, you have other things there, you have other, but typically, and hopefully, similar definitions of entities, perhaps relationships between those entities, but also their attributes, right? These are typically the same ones that are used downstream in a quote semantic layer, or typically just in a data warehouse type environment. Right now, obviously, the data munging that occurs in those environments is more suitable for analytics. But what I've often found is that the source data needs to have some sort of fidelity that even the application developers can understand, right? Yeah. And then basically, because I was thinking about this earlier, I don't think about this a lot actually, but I was talking about this earlier. But data, we're talking about the notion of boundaries around data. Right. What are the boundaries and separations of concern? And if you treat data as being siloed, I actually think this is a bad idea because data actually moves continuously. But then you would need sort of a continuous sense of the semantics across how data moves and is used. And I think in data, all too often, the semantic layer is great, except it acts more as duct tape on the fidelity and the understandability of the data that's upstream. Whereas if you had I think a better understanding of it further upstream, where it's created, if there's some sort of you call it semantic layer, call it whatever you want. You sort of have this. It sort of accomplishes what people have been trying to do with a universal data model, right? The UML tried to solve this, but it's something I've been thinking a lot about. Like if you were to look at data modeling as sort of an end-to-end exercise of a continuous flow of data, is there a different way of describing things in such a way that it's understandable across all modalities, across all use cases? And I think perhaps there might be something we're still working out. But when I heard the semantic layer was in the analytics only section, the process nerd in me, the lean part, like just shuddered in horror, because I'm like, you're not attacking the correct root cause here. You're simply bandaging it, and it actually makes it worse because you haven't fixed any of the data upstream. You're simply doing what we always do in data, which is, we used to SQL, just have a bunch of where clauses that try and patch things over. And now we have something that's a bit more abstracted, but so it makes the lives of the analysts better in that sense, where you have sort of if everyone uses it, you have a universal layer of understandability. But I felt for a long time it actually should exist upstream, either through introspecting the code itself or some other way. But it's something I've been actively thinking about as a written book. Like, what does that look like? So anyway.
That's actually pretty interesting to me. And I think it's not incompatible is the way I think about it too, right?
It's not.
Right. Well, like as we were practitioners, we ran these systems and so on. I always found like the ironic thing is that frequently the metadata we had around running our own data platforms was really poor.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yep.
And so to really get these platforms to run properly, you got to build your own set of metadata and have these concepts. Like what's a pipeline? I actually think the analogy pipeline is not very good for data, because like we took a pipeline, we bring up this notions of water and stuff flowing through, right? But that's not quite what data is, because in the pipe, if I bifurcate the pipe, if I split the pipe and send water to two different locations, I don't get more water, right? Right. But it was data. We can make copies and broadcast it, spread it all around. It's more like a transmission series. Maybe that's a better word for it, but it's transmission. It's not pipelines really. But even if you were trying to define a pipeline, like, hey, show me the pipeline for this this report. Pipeline's not a well-defined concept, right? It's very, right? You have to go back, and really the pipeline is the definition of what the pipeline is for that report is really sort of like, well, what elements of the report are you looking at, or are you looking at the whole report, this part, and so on. And so I think it ties with your notion that it's all one thing, right? And in fact, that report, you cannot understand the true value in a report if you don't understand what the data came from.
Bingo.
Right? There you go. So it's
and not only where it came from, but also like why it went there in the first place.
Yeah.
Right? How's it collected? Right? So at some point, either some automated process captured the data, or somebody, typed it in, whatever, maybe it's a CRM, a sales, but unless you understand that flow, like I don't think you understand. And then the analogy I was using, this is in the context of data governance, really, and how we need to govern, this data set, that data set. And I was like, that's great. You can certainly do that from a privacy standpoint and so forth. But I was giving the analogy that of my cabin in Wyoming, there's a creek that goes through it, and at least in America, we have water rights as long as the water that we use is within the confines of our property. But the thing is, it's a great notion in terms of property, but also like the water's never the same. It continuously flows, and so the whole notion is like this is sort of like data in some way, where we can artificially put boundaries on it and so forth. But ownership is one of those things where I don't know. You never sip in the same river twice. That's like I view data, and it goes back to the whole notion of the just the continuum.
Right.
Of how data works. And so anyway, we're getting kind of metaphysical here, but but part of my goal is to help break down the silos, with analytics and especially people left of you and so forth.
Yep. No, it makes
sense. Becoming artificial distinctions.
The metaphysical part of it is relevant too, right? I mean, you throw in Heisenberg. Okay, we made a and things have changed, right?
Mm-hmm.
And of course, people forget that all data is an approximation, except in some weird quantum world, right? Data and reality are not the same thing. You took a measurement, you tried to guess what was happening, and then we take that measurement and we move it downstream. And we have to be aware of things like value density, like how good was the measurement, how accurate, how much information. Your depreciation, your weather report gets less and less valuable as time goes by, right? Some data is highly volatile in terms of if it's used, it loses value, like a treasure map, versus like a Google Maps. Google Maps is like highly reusable, right? But a treasure map is not necessarily. And so if you don't think about these concepts, how are you going to really measure and manage the ROI of those data products you're using?
Very good point.
But this touches a little bit though to your point about we only have a couple of minutes left, but like thinking,
Oh, we can go if you want.
I haven't figured it out yet, but like, thinking about cube in the semantic layer, and I do like having, I really like treating my business. I don't like the term semantic layer that much because it's not that accessible. It's your business layer,
Yeah.
right? It's kind of the most valuable piece of intellectual property you can build inside a company because it's it's how you describe your business and how you're running it. If you buy into that, and if you're actually doing that, measuring, doesn't that become the natural place for the data catalog and to extend outward from? Right? I mean, here's the most concentrated value. Here's your objects that should be persisted. Here's the ones you should really be versioning. LTV, return on ad spend, and customer acquisition costs, all that stuff, right? If that's there, I kind of feel like the data catalog or the data dictionary or all the other sets should all connect to this. And to your point, really, it's all really one thing.
Yeah, it is. And hopefully the data catalog to extend, again, upstream as well, right? Which a lot of them don't. It's just all about the analytical data. And I think so. And then and I haven't used Omni or Cube in production, so I don't have an opinion about how good they use. I do have a lot of experience with Looker, right? And so, and I think that the great thing about Looker is that theoretically I can encapsulate all my data, write it once, reuse it anywhere. Right? Yep. To me, that was the amazing thing. And again, to your point, you can capture the grammar, the metrics, and so forth. If you have different, what happens commonly in a lot of companies is if you have multiple versions of one thing, like different versions of a customer, different versions of sales.
Yeah.
No big deal. We can define them. You can reuse them once. Because otherwise, the chaos on the ground, and then these vendors will tell you as well. And so what's happened is you just have a million SQL scripts or a million Python notebooks trying to describe the same thing.
Yep.
All differently. Like I just got back from Europe last week, and if I say I'm in France, they speak French there. I don't try and have an opinion on the type of French I want to speak there, because nobody will understand what I'm trying to say, right? So I try and speak French or English, but we agree like what language we'll be using. But businesses aren't like that, right? It's like everyone has their own sort of sub-thread or take on what say French should be like or English, and it's. And people wonder why the data is a mess.
Right, so. It needs to be like that. I mean, e-commerce, like e-commerce analytics should be, and some of the other industries should be no more. They should be boring. They should be boring, meaning consistent, right? Like it should be as boring as general accounting practices. I mean, like politics aside, Wall Street's an amazing machine that cannot exist without general accounting practices, standard language to describe basic phenomena. Right.
Yeah.
And you take that away, Wall Street's gone.
If you said the word revenue, and I was like, yeah, but I'm going to call that a pen.
Yeah.
Like, what do you? I do what I want.
I worked for a CFO once who used to include sales tax and revenue, right? And it confused all of us because none of us expected that, and we're like, how come the reports aren't tying out, right?
Ooh.
And even now I still think it was a weird choice, but that was like the more important point is we need to define our terms.
Yep.
We couldn't even discuss if revenue was correct, a definition of revenue was correct without defining it.
That's got to be frustrating.
We spent months trying to figure out how come our numbers are lower than the CFO's numbers. And he mentions it one day, oh, by the way, you guys probably aren't including sales tax. We're like, no, we're not including sales tax. Why are you including sales tax and revenue? But
why was he including sales tax and revenue?
I don't know. He was the CFO. Maybe he wanted a bigger number. My company's long gone. So
CSO or CFO?
CFO.
Huh. What does GAAP allow? Does it allow for? Is it just? Let me just Google this.
I don't know. I just looked it up. Maybe he was right all along.
Should revenue include sales tax? Let me put in GAAP actually.
Yeah.
So otherwise, people are like, oh yeah, you can do that. Let's see. Associated goods or services must have been delivered or rendered. Collected for sales tax should not be included in any revenue line items. Okay.
See?
That's what I thought. I was like, am I being gaslit here? Like,
I know.
what's going on?
We were definitely a little bit dumbfounded at the time, but it goes back to language before analysis, right? I tell all the analysts I work with, hey, are you really ask them, are you really sure people know understand? Does your audience understand the terms you're going to use the way you understand them? Because if they don't, they're not going to get your brilliant insight.
Okay, I'll give you an example of revenue, right? So a company I worked at, we sold to a lot of big box retailers. So you know how they treat your shipment to them? That's they treat that as basically anything you ship to them is basically consignment. Like you technically own it until, well, you don't own it. They bought it, but the thing is they reserve the right to return it to you. So it's effectively a consignment operation. And so what we did, and this is an interesting perspective, but the accountants and lawyers did it, but they recognized revenue when it sold off the shelf. Because if you think of it as, you just ship if I ship something to you,
Yep.
but you don't sell it through, but you have the right to return it to me. I mean, you're effectively in my warehouse, right? So that's no different. So what they did is they said, yeah, we'll just do it on sell-through, basically. So we spent a gob of money on getting a sell-through reporting, but that saved a lot in basically reportable taxes, right? And so that was definitely. But if you came from the outside, you'd be like, okay, so we're going to base revenue on shipments only. You would have thought the revenue was much, 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 much higher.
Right.
So it's another example, but again, like that's not orthodox. So
yeah, and software sales gets even weirder, right?
Oh, that's a big one. That's a weird one.
It's a really weird one. Yeah.
I
Unfortunately, I gotta roll. I got.
Yeah, no worries, man. Yeah, good to talk to you.
Soccer.
As always, super nerdy. Anyway, for the audience, this is Gordon. We have chats like this all the time. We'll see you back maybe in about a month or so when we do another.
They should raise your hand, right? We could do this. We could do a fireside.
Love to anytime. All right.
Cheers, Joe.
See ya. Bye bye.
Bye bye.